Today I'm cheating again and going back to re-record episode 4, which was Genesis chapters 10 and 11, being the story of the Tower of Babel. As I said previously, this is just because I quite like being able to refer back to my previous videos, and it's quite a useful resource for me in terms of my study when I come across something and like, oh, I need to look back. Some of the early videos were just so bad I can't re-listen to them, they're just terrible. This one, however, is actually a bit of a double cheat, because this is the second time I'm re-recording it, because it turned out it was so short once I've re-recorded it, and now I do a little less pausing and umming and ahhing. It made me think, did I really get so little out of that? And granted, this story of Tower of Babel is quite short anyway, but it prompted me to go back and just quickly reread it again, because it's quite short. And it's difficult because, I mean, I haven't taken a huge amount out of there. You'd think I've been studying the Bible for 2 and a bit years at this point, so, you know, I thought I should be quite scholarly and have some new ideas. But no. The other than I would say that actually the chapter 10 opens with the descendants of Noah's sons, is Ham, Shem and Japheth. And the list for the Hamites, I think it was the Hamites, is a bunch of familiar names now. So when I first read this, it just didn't mean anything. But now it's talking about, it's got the Girgashites in there, and reference to Aram and Cush, which later found out is broadly Ethiopia. There's even reference to Egypt and then Canaan as well. So these are clearly all people, and then all these people split off into their tribes, and later on it's going to be the tribes that the Israelites then have to tangle with. I appreciate that's a bit of a spoiler alert, but, well, who cares? Never mind, we'll soldier on. The story of the Tower of Babel, this is the one, when I first sat down to read this originally, I thought I knew roughly what it was, because in my head it was them building a tower to try and get to heaven, basically so they could, toddle up this thing and then toddle into heaven. And there is reference to building a tower up to heaven, but it's for their sort of, just to show off, basically. Doesn't seem any actual physical attempt to get to heaven. And I thought God knocked it down because of their arrogance, but it turns out God knocks it down, seemingly, because it's some great feat of cooperation, and God is worried that if they're working together this well, then soon nothing will be impossible for them. So he has to go down there and sort of scramble up their language and split them up. It's a bit weird. There is reference in this to God saying, come, let us go down there and confuse them, or whatever it was. And I missed in the original video, so, well, who's he talking to? I assumed when I originally recorded this that it was reference to angels, but I've heard since this talk of the idea it could be Jesus, because Jesus is supposed to have been around since the beginning, not referenced by name or anything, and not physical on the earth, but around, so God could be talking to him. And I don't think actually ultimately it matters, because we can't know either way, so I sort of stand by my original not bothering to pick it up, because there's nothing we can do with it anyway. I guess my big issue with this comes down to it being a why problem. So why is God not happy with people working together and seemingly doing a great job? And it talks about them, instead of using stone to build this city, they're baking soil or whatever it is to make bricks. So just everything's going quite well in terms of technology. Bricks, for the time. And God really doesn't like that. So the obvious question is, why would God not like that? And in turn, I guess that begs the question of when Adam and Eve sinned and God puts enmity between people as part of their punishment, that obviously drives people apart. And now as people have sort of set their differences aside and come together and manage to work and achieve great things, God comes down and interferes again, as it were, to deliberately split them up. It's a difficult one because, God's agenda is clearly he wants people going out and multiplying, and that seems to be pretty top of the agenda. So he seems to want to grow some diversity. But the extent to which he's willing to intervene to do that is interesting, whereas you think people working together would be a great thing. It does make you think, what about modern context? And if you think of America, it's basically a country built on immigration and cooperation, and then they go and land on the moon, some time ago. So what would God think of that? If he didn't like the Tower of Babel, then what about the moon landing? That's surely a greater feat of that sort of thing. I guess there is an argument there, interestingly, that we went to the moon a few times and then stopped and nothing really happened. And so nothing came of it anyway. So if God didn't want those sort of things happening, then he still got his result, and perhaps it was dealt within a different way or something like that. But it does feel a little bit like over-reading into these sort of things. I think as well that's another interesting part of the Tower of Babel story, because you can read bits that people say, okay, this is what it is, or that's what it is, and it's quite elaborate. It's like 2 + 2 = 912. And that's one of the things I think you have to be really careful with in the Bible. It's so easy you can hear great explanations, you think, that's brilliant. And then you go back to the text, it's like, well, there's nothing in there that really says that. So where are the extra ingredients coming from to get the end result? And I don't really have an answer to my own question there, but it's just something I'm very much bearing in mind. Let's say I'm up to Isaiah at this point as I'm coming back to record this. I suppose a simple literal angle on this is the introduction of language, because we obviously have Adam and Eve start the human race, and then it all gets wiped out at the Noah point, and then resets with Noah's sons. So coming from a common origin, presumably everyone speaks the same language. So I mean, it would creep over time regionally, I suppose, but if you were writing the Bible, would you need some sort of explanation for why there are lots of different languages? Don't quite know. I mean, you would get some minor differences that would eke over time, I suppose. That being said, just my daughter, some of the stuff that she comes out with, I have no idea what you just said to me. All this modern stuff. Very weird. So I guess perhaps it doesn't take that long for language to drift and end up meaning very different things if you spread people out. I don't think I can give it that literal thing, though. I mean, I don't have any basis for that particularly. I mean, all you can do is read this stuff and see, does it sit with me that this would make sense? That people would build a massive tower and God would come down with angels and go, no, not doing that, and mess the language up and spread them out. It just doesn't logically follow, so I can't take that in my brain to be as a logical thing. So I don't really know what to do with that, and I'd say we'd just leave it and move on, but it doesn't really make much sense in the rest of the stuff that I've already read either. So I guess that's an F+ for me on that one. I've failed to come up with any sort of conclusion for what the Tower of Babel means. So if anyone has any great ideas for what I might have missed there, I would love to hear it. Finally, though, one of the bits in this that I did miss the first time was it talks about, it shows, the lineages show that there's about 400 years between Noah's son and Abraham. And it sort of occurred that because of the age of Noah, he got to, 950 or whatever it was, it probably means that Noah and Abraham were around at the same time. I don't think that matters in the slightest, but for some reason I found that vaguely interesting, and I thought, if you like that sort of thing, then there's an idea anyway. But anyway, the normal weekly schedule will continue, and that's me reading the book of Isaiah at the minute, and then I will come back to periodically fix these older videos as I can.